What was it that got you so passionate about the topics that you speak on? I know you're such an advocate for the continent of Africa and for economic freedom. What was it in your background or growing up that just made you so passionate and fiery on this issue?
Well, there is this, I had to ask myself that question at some point, but the one time that I can really point to about all of this is that time when I arrived in Germany. When I arrived in Germany again, I was around age 7, and then I come and I look around, and I was just thinking to myself, wait, how come they have this and we don't? And the this was simply in this case. Back home, when grandma said, because my grandma took care of me while my parents were away, when grandma said, Magatte, it's time for your shower, Zuby, a good 45 minutes to an hour could go by between the moment she made that decision and me getting that water touching my skin. And the reason was not because I was, procrastinating. You know how kids are, go play one more round with your friends or whatever. It's just because grandma had to get a stove of coal going, put a pot of water on it, wait for it to boil. Then we would mix, dump that into a bigger bucket, mix it with colder water for safer temperature for me. Then somebody stronger than grandma would drag the bucket to the shower area. And there at last, some 45 minutes to an hour later, I could start to take my shower with a smaller little pot, taking from the big tank to my body. But then here in Germany, mom was like, my God, it's time for your shower. I'm like, where is the bucket of warm water? I'm not getting naked in this cold weather because I arrived in the middle of winter. And she said, come on, you silly, just jump in the shower. So I jump in there, turn the knobs around, the water's coming down. And then you're just looking at this. And in my case, I couldn't think of anything else than a really crazy case of juju going on. It was just like, this cannot be real. I was just like, there's no way, man. What is this?
What
And
was so that was that your first time
yeah,
just having like an actual
yeah.
shower?
Yes, yes,
Oh,
yes, yes,
interesting.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because where we grew up, we didn't have running water in the home, let alone this warm water coming down, when it's cold. Because we do have some cold times in Senegal. We're right by the beach, right? And it was just like, whoa. So that was my first time, you know. And then, but then it was like that about everything else. It was like that about the paved roads. I grew up in this little, village where there's no paved roads. Then these grocery stores. Yes, today in Africa we have many grocery stores, especially chains coming from abroad. But back in the days, in my little village, there was no such thing. So you had these markets, the street markets and the normal markets where if it rains, good luck, and all of that, and the flies, everything. And here you walk into these grocery stores, everything is neatly put together. There is more types of apples and breads than my little brain could count. And I was just like, wow, what is this? And that question of how come they have this and we don't, that's really all I was talking about. I was talking about the ease of life. From where I was, 5 7 year old little girl, I was like, this is weird. And and it was so weird that it became the defining question of my life. I needed to know. I was like, what's going on here? What is this? And eventually, as I was growing up and trying to figure out this answer to this question, the question became, how come some countries like mine and so many others in Africa are poor, while others like the US, Australia, New Zealand, you name it, are rich? What's going on here? And along the journey of trying to get the answer to that question, by now, Zuby, I can tell you that I've pretty much heard it all because even to this day, the same reasons keep popping up. So, what did I hear? To this day, people with a very straight face telling you that, oh, darling, it's not your fault. It's the IQ fury. You know that IQ map of the world that you see going around all the time. And I do know that in Silicon Valley, there is a subset of these, you know, tech entrepreneurs who somehow it seems like believe that piece as well. But I digress. So the IQ fury. Blacks and browns are simply not as smart as others. And then you also hear people say, oh, because Africans are lazy. You hear people say, oh, you're poor because of colonialism, because of slavery, because of racism, because of blah, blah. You hear it all. But Zubi, at the end of the day, when I take these so-called reasons as to why we're poor today, the poorest region in the world, I can put them literally into categories. One category is the people who want to blame everybody else under the sun as to why we're where we are. So there you have, I call them all the isms, racisms, colonialism, all of those guys. It's in there. You're poor because of somebody else's, and somebody else is actively against you. And I call those all various forms of, victimhood reasons. And on the other end, the other category is the category where you're lazy, you're low IQ, you're always fighting, you can't help it. Those are all the reasons where somebody is telling me that there is something inherently wrong with me as a person and my character. But you know, Zuby, none of these make sense to me though. None of them make sense because I'll take the colonialism part. Colonialism. You look at Ethiopia. For the long, Ethiopia is the one nation in Africa that has never been colonized. Yet for the longest time, it's been the poster child for poverty in Africa, right? And conversely, you have Botswana, which been colonized before by the British, and Botswana has been one of the top performers on the continent from the end of colonization to this day. So that doesn't add up. And then if you go back to all the reasons that supposedly because there's something inherently wrong with me, then you go explain to me why is it that the moment the same people that you deemed unworthy somehow, the minute they get to these other places in Europe or in America, somewhere else in the West, of these other nations that seem to be more prosperous, all of a sudden they get to self-actualize. So it's not adding up. None of this is adding up, except that I'm looking at this equation and I'm seeing that the only variable in this equation is the place that people get to be in or not. So now I'm thinking to myself, this has to be with the place. What is it about these places that if one is there, they get to self-actualize? Or if they're in another place like this, they get to not self-actualize? What is it about these places? So that's kind of where I was at in my thinking by the time I moved to the US.
Today's episode is brought to you by Sambrosa, the best way to get your 8 hours of rest. I met the owners of the company while they were on tour with Tucker Carlson, and their nighttime syrup has been a game changer for me. It's really effective to get your quality rest at night. Sambrosa contains a natural base of 7 organic herbs, honey, and a small amount of antihistamine. It's effective and soothing with no harsh chemicals, no high fructose corn syrup, no artificial colors or dyes, and it helps with nighttime allergies. Sambrosa is a family-owned company who share my values of faith, freedom, and integrity. I've been using their products since before they started sponsoring this podcast, so I can personally vouch for its quality. My listeners can try Sambrosa today and get 10% off by going to sambrosa.com/Zuby10. That's SAMBROSA.com/Zuby10 for 10% off. Try Sambrosa and wake up ready to embrace life's opportunities.